All right. NBT Nation. How are we doing this morning? Checking cameras, checking mics. It's a Saturday morning. We're going live 2 weeks in a row. How about that? Let me make sure everything's going here. Boy, I tell you what, NBT Nation, I am excited about this one. We're going to dive into common frustrations, things that drive trainers nuts in a corporate setting. Whether you train full time or you just deliver training once in a while as part of your responsibilities, there's some pretty common things that happen that drive us bananas. Room stealers, dismissers, know it alls, good idea fairies. There's a whole bunch of different things that are pretty universal from trainer to trainer to trainer, regardless of your industry, regardless of what you actually train. There's some pretty common things that drive us all bananas. We're going to dive in a little bit to those. This is part one. We're going to unpack those, poke a little bit of fun, and then talk about what do you do? How do you minimize that frustration point? Or more importantly, what do you do to avoid it altogether? If you find this interesting, if you find this helpful, be sure to sub to the channel so we can keep making great content like this. Be sure to follow me across socials and visit me at noboringtraining.com. NoBoringTraining.com, the home of NBT Nation, where you can join NBT Nation subscription service. You can find the quick tips video channel. You can take the 6 pillars of interesting and effective training free course. You can find free video topics. There's all sorts of resources there. So Saturday morning, things that drive trainers insane, or maybe if I'm being more accurate, things that drive me insane, but I think they are pretty universal. All right, let's dive in here on a Saturday morning live. I've broken this out by topics. So hopefully today we're going to get to topic 1 and topic 2, and then in part 2, we'll dial in some other topics. Topic 1, managers and leaders. Managers and leaders. That's topic number 1, and pretty common source of frustration and irritation for us lowly trainers. So let's dive in to the first one, which is the good idea fairy. This is that individual who is just constantly throwing out ideas. I think we should do this. I think we should do that. What if we do this? What if we try that? What if we try? And it can be overwhelming. And don't get me wrong, don't get it twisted. Of course, we love ideas. We love people with suggestions. And there's a lot of good suggestions. But buddy, it can be so annoying when you've got a plan, you're going this way, you've got this whole roadmap, and over here you've got, what about this? What about that? And we could try this and we could try that. It can be even more frustrating when that good idea fairy is going to senior leadership with those good ideas, and they're not coming to you as the trainer. And then all of a sudden, even though you've got this plan for your training, now you get the senior leader with the good idea that was created by the good idea fairy. Good idea fairy, super common source of frustration. So what do you do about them? Number 1, have a strategic plan for your trainings. Have a strategic roadmap. Work together with senior leadership so that your training is aligned to the needs of the organization, and go down that pathway. Because if you have that strategic plan and the good idea fairy comes along with, hey, what about, you can tamp that down a little bit if that good idea does not align with the strategic vision of training, which is supporting the team, the firm at a strategic level. There's not much runway left for the good ideas. So that's number 1, have a strategic plan. Number 2, have you communicated that plan? Now, that's a mistake I've made in the past where I've got all this grand vision for training, but the only person in the organization who knows and understands it is me. And that's not good either. A great way to keep the good idea fairies in check: communicate your strategic plans for training in concert with, in lockstep with senior leadership. Does senior leadership know and understand that plan? Do they endorse that plan? Do they communicate that plan down to their level, their sphere of influence? And then are you, as the trainer, communicating that plan outwards? So, do you have a strategic plan? Do you communicate that plan? Great way to keep good idea fairies in check. And then, lastly, when the good idea fairy comes along and says, here's my neato idea, tell me more about why that would be helpful to achieve this strategic outcome, or explain it more or elaborate. Tell me more about that idea. Because sometimes those good idea fairies have amazing ideas. I don't want good idea fairy to have a negative connotation. Sometimes you got people who are just constantly throwing out noise that is disruptive and distractive. And that's why you have a strategic plan for training. But sometimes that noise, there's some really good ideas there that you can pull from other teams and other departments and start to bring some clarity and cohesion across groups. So you want to hear, you don't want to just dismiss all the ideas. You want to hear them. The key is get the good idea fairy to really explain their plan in detail and help educate them. But, well, how does this piece fit with the strategic vision of this piece? Because this is where we're focusing on. So how do we tie this to that? And have the good idea fairy connect the roadmap. Have the good idea fairy tell you how to get there. Otherwise, they're just going to come up with the idea and dump it on you to do the work. So have a plan, communicate that plan, and then draw the ideas out from the good idea fairy so that you can use them to help the organization, and then bring the good idea fairy into the process of defining that out. Hey, help me to understand how this connects to that, and then pull them into the process so they don't dump the work on you. So good idea fairies, super duper common source of frustration for corporate trainers. And that's what we're talking about this morning. Common sources of frustration. All righty. Second area of frustration, the know-it-all. The absolute know-it-all. And this is sort of a cousin to the good idea fairy. I've run into this over the years, that you have a clear plan for your trainings. You are absolutely the master of training delivery, but you're constantly fending off people in the organization who absolutely think we should be doing this or that. And they're not shy about communicating that internally. It's not just an idea of like, hey, I think we should do this. It's they are trying to dictate to the training group how things should be done, whether or not they know anything about training or know anything about the training plan. Those people can eat up a lot of bandwidth. Oh, you're trying to go this way and they're busy trying to pull everything that way. And maybe that way is a really good idea, but they're like so busy trying to dictate that it's not helpful to trying to go this way. The know-it-all. You know what we ought to do? We ought to do this. How do you deal with that? Because it can be insanely frustrating in the moment. Number one, have a strategic plan for your training, just like with the good idea fairies, and communicate that plan across many channels. Make sure you are communicating that plan so that everybody in the organization can see what the strategic plan for training is and they get a sense of it. What that does is the next time they say, well, you know what we ought to do, is number one, everybody knows that there's a plan for what we are doing. And that plan ties to the strategic needs of the organization, not the needs of that individual who seems to have it all figured out. You want your strategic plan tied to strategic vision. When they start saying, you know what we ought to do, you got a lot more people on your side to say, well, that doesn't make sense because we're already doing this, this, and this over here. Number two, have a strategic plan, communicate that plan, invite them into your sessions. Don't be shy, face it heads on. Hey, you know what? I really appreciate that input and feedback. That is fantastic. Why don't you come observe some of our training sessions? Why don't you carve out, we're having a workshop tomorrow from 8 to 5. Why don't you come join it? It, does a couple things. One is they're probably not going to take you up on that offer. But if they do, that brings them in as a partner. um, it brings them in because sometimes those, you know what we ought to do, it can build, like as a trainer, it can get frustrating and we build a wall of resistance. And if we push through that to say, no, come in, come see what we're doing. We have a strategic plan. We have communicated that plan across many channels, but come observe the training. I welcome your feedback. I welcome your input. And I want you to see it with your own eyes, what it is we're trying to do. So invite them in. And then lastly, I've done this many times over the years. Smile, nod, really listen, like legitimately listen, because what we ought to do could be a really good thing. But if sometimes you get the what we ought to do is nonsensical, smile, be respectful, be polite. Yeah, let me chew on that. Yeah, let me really think about that. Let me think how we can pull the pieces together because we're already going this other direction. And then just chew on it for a long time. Until either they forget and move on, or if they come back a second time, then you can roll up your sleeves and say, hey, listen, the strategic plan for training is to go this way. Your roles and responsibilities have little to nothing to do with training, but help me to understand why you're saying this. Help me to understand how this fits together. Well, let's dialogue. Let's talk about it. A lot of times, though, let me chew on it turns into they disappear and then never comes up again. All right, so we've covered the good idea fairy. How do you deal with them? How do you deal with the know-it-all who just absolutely knows what we should be doing with training, regardless of to whether they've actually delivered training or step foot in the training room or understand anything. All right. So we've got some folks joining us out there. I see Andy Kaufman and Jeremiah Hammond in the house. Project Revolution. What up? How you doing, bro? Good to see you both joining us right now. We are talking about common training frustrations, and more importantly, what do you do about them? And if you find this helpful, give it a thumbs up so we can keep making great content like this. Be sure to go explore noboringtraining.com. Jeremiah, thank you so much for taking time. I think it's like 3 a.m. West Coast time or something right now. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. All right, another common source of training frustration, and I have broken this down into. I'm starting with from leadership and management groups. What are the common sources of frustration? First up was the good idea fairy. Second up was the know-it-all. The third up is the dismisser. Super common to run into this, whether you train full time or you just deliver training once in a while as part of your role. There's the dismisser. Training doesn't work. We just do shadowing. People learn better by doing, so we just throw them into the job role. I didn't need training back in 1932 when I started as a manager. I didn't need training, so why do we need training now? There are loads of people throughout the organization, possibly in senior leadership, possibly just frontline managers, who dismiss training. And that can be a super common source of frustration for trainers. And I've run into that. I've run into that frontline manager who's just so focused on daily operations and that training it's like 57th on their list. I've seen that frontline manager who doesn't believe in training at all. I've seen the senior leadership who just, it's an afterthought. How do you do about that? Oh, the Eeyore. What do you mean by that, Jeremiah? Give me a little bit of a definition on that, and we can add them to the list for sure. The dismisser, here's how you handle them. Number one, don't take it personally. I'm talking to myself here. It can be very easy as a trainer because we're so passionate. We're so focused on helping others. We're so emotionally invested that we get instantly defensive. And when you do, you get emotional. And in the moment, you don't need emotion. What you need is cold, hard logic. So push through taking that personally. There's just people that don't believe in training. They just don't. It is what it is. There's people who haven't experienced the power of good training. There's a lot of field level managers who don't value training because they've experienced bad training themselves, or they haven't seen the power of what good training looks like. They haven't experienced no boring training yet. So they just think all training is garbage. And the second you get defensive, you're just playing into that fallacy. So don't get defensive, number one. Number two, don't engage. That seems a little counterintuitive. Here's what I mean by that. When they start sort of crapping all over training, well, we don't need training, man, blah, 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 blah. Don't engage. Don't go down that rabbit hole of trying to convince them in the moment. Instead, why do you feel that way? Can you give me some examples of how your shadowing program has been where you just throw people into watching other people work? Give me some examples of why that's been successful. Could you give me your itinerary of what you do to onboard people and when you just do on the job training? What does that look like? Don't engage in an argument. Instead, draw them out. Walk me through. Why do you feel the way you do? Why do you feel like training's not effective? What do you do? And bring them in. You may find that maybe they're just not explaining themselves well in the moment. You may find that they have a really great shadowing program that you can then offer them bits and pieces of your trainings to make that shadowing even better and start to build some trust with that individual. You may find that they just have a skewed view of what training you can offer. You may find that their compensation models are so heavily weighted to operations that they are losing money by dedicating time for training. That's not that field manager's fault. That's an organizational issue. And you got to find a way to sneak training in one-on-one and partner with that manager. So don't engage and get into conflict. Get, dig in. And then lastly, the dismisser, have clear examples of how training can be effective or how other teams are succeeding. Hey, I feel you. You're so busy. You don't have time for training. You haven't seen it work. Let me give you some examples. Team A and B have done this and this. I've partnered with them. This is how it's been helpful. And if this would be helpful to you, I'd be happy to partner with you as well. So there you have it. There is another common source of training frustrations. You got the good idea fairy, you got the know-it-all, you got the dismisser. We got two more categories to go in the leadership management group. Common sources of frustration: the never know what's going on, the constantly lost person, the person who no matter what comes up, they're just like, oh, I didn't know we had that training. Oh, I didn't know we had that e-learning module. Oh, I didn't know we had that LMS system. Where do I find the link to that again? What do you mean you've put out a chat every day with practical tips on what to do? Like, where do I even find the chat? I'm so lost and confused. No matter what you do, they never seem to know what's going on with training. Wildly frustrating. I mean, I'm talking like, oof. So let me take a sip of coffee and I'll tell you exactly how to deal with them. Jeremiah, you still out there, bro? Getting some Project Revolution training, NBT Revolution, some sort of weird hybrid that way. Awesome. Is this helpful? On track? Let me know. Give me some comments there. Here's what you do to handle the never knows what's going on people. One, take some extreme ownership. Review your communications plan. Don't just instantly get defensive. And listen, once again, I am talking directly to myself here. It can be so frustrating when you pour your energy into this new training resource and you launch your communications plan and you email and you Teams message and you have explainer videos and you do stand-up meetings and you do skywriting and interpretive dance and all that stuff. And then you get the person who's like, I have no idea what's happening. It could be like, you can get really ticked off really quick. You got to push through that and look inward. What is your communication plan? Was it effective? Did you reach all the right channels? Did you make it streamlined? Did you burn through the noise that field manager is getting blown up all day long. They're dealing with field level problems. They're dealing with their team. They got 5,000 other people in the organization trying to get their time. They got organization metrics. They got to report out. They got daily issues they're dealing with. And if you don't review your communication plan to make sure that it was effective, you're just one more noise in the background. So review your communication plan. Was it effective? If it's a senior leader, same thing. Did you communicate in a way that a senior leader is likely to hear and recognize? Did you put together an effective executive summary? Did you put it in small digestible bites? Did you make the communication about the training relevant to that senior leader, or did you just repurpose the general announcement to the participants of the training? Like, you use the announcement to the participants to the senior leader. They ain't going to read the 2 paragraphs you put together. They just want a couple bullet points. So review your communications plan. Ask that individual when they're like, "I didn't know, I don't know." They never know what's going on. Hey, how can I communicate more effectively to you? Because I value you understanding what's going on in the world of training. I want to put out trainings that help you and your teams. How can I communicate to you more effectively? I'm doing Teams chats. Would you prefer an email? I'm doing email. Would you prefer a Teams chat? Would a 30-second explainer video be helpful? Do you want it in writing? Do you want me to like type out a memo and send it to you? Would you prefer skywriting? Do you want balloons and chocolate? I don't like what works for you. Find that out, because sometimes we try to cover all the bases and we never really dial in what's effective for that individual. So when you got that individual who never seems to know what's going on, just ask them straight out. And then lastly, take the time to show them all the ways to find out about the training plans. If you use a SharePoint site, share that link again for the 9 trillionth time. If it's done through email, share, hey, here's the email channel. Here's where you find it. Here's the Slack channel. Here's the whatever. If you put an announcement on the old style cork board down in the in the break room where the shift takes their breaks, and you just tack it up with an old school push pin, walk them down. Hey, this is where I put out the notice every Monday. I come out and tack it up. I put it in the top left-hand corner of the cork board. It's on pink paper. Look for that, bro. Really take the time to show them, because again, you are fighting for relevancy in the day-to-day noise of operations. And sometimes you just got to go back again and again and again. And then lastly, with the never seems to know, there's somebody like that in every organization. They're going to be lost in the sauce no matter what. And you just can't take it personally. If you've done all those other steps and they're just constantly lost, you know what? If you got one person out of 1,000, deal with that one person. It is what it is, sadly. So there you go. We got one more group in the leadership management sources of frustration and how you handle them. This is a big one. See if you can guess what it is. If you're listening out there, let me know. Leave me a comment. Who do you think? What do you think the label of this next group is going to be? We've had the good idea fairy. We have the know-it-alls. We've had the dismissers. We've had the never knows what's going on. Oh, I need coffee too, bro. It's coffee is the rocker. Ooh, I like that. This one is what I like to call the distant or the avoidant, the distant or avoidant, usually found in the ranks of senior leadership. You are super duper passionate about training, super duper passionate about learning. You've put together a strategic program that ties to the needs of the organization, but you've got those senior leaders who never seem to really want to give training the time of the day. You pass in the hallway, and as soon as you say the T word of training, their eyes glaze over. And it can be really rough because you need that senior leadership support. You need them on board. You need that executive leadership group to really recognize the power of an effective training program in the organization. And if they're distant, if they're disconnected, if they just don't see that training is part of that, buddy, it makes it tough. So here's what you do, and it can cause a lot of frustration. It can cause so much frustration because you put all this energy into this really cool training, new module or new program or new explainer video or whatever. And the senior leadership can't even give it the time of day. And it just withers on the vine. Super duper frustrating, super demotivating as trainers. Here's what you do. Get on their calendar. Sometimes, and I've made this mistake, trust me, I've made this mistake. Sometimes as trainers, we think if we just keep putting out good stuff, eventually leadership will see it. And eventually good leadership will see it. But good leadership is usually very, very busy. They got so many competing interests. They got so much on their radar that just hoping that they figure it out by osmosis is not very effective. So get on their calendar. Schedule time on their calendar. Don't just sit and wait and hope that they see that you're doing this amazing stuff and that they connect the dots. Keep it short, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, very, very short. Have a very clear agenda on the meeting invite. This is what I want to talk to you about. I want to brief you on this program. I want to explain exactly why we're doing this. I want to I want to connect the dots for you of how this ties with that. And this is what I'm hoping to accomplish in this short period of time that we're together. Keep it short, keep it powerful, keep it tight, and put an agenda on there. And just go ahead and get on their calendar. Don't wait. Schedule the time. If they don't want to talk to you, they'll decline. And then you can deal with that. A lot of times they'll accept that meeting. And then when you show up to that meeting, come in hard. Come in with, this is what we're doing. This is a summary of what this program looks like. This is why I'm doing it. I need your advice. I just need you to be aware. I need your support. I need you to give me feedback on this. I need to understand the bigger strategic vision of the organization so that I can make sure this program lines up with that. Whatever that agenda is going to be, make sure it's in there. If you don't want to schedule a full-blown meeting on their calendar, ask for 15 minutes. Hey, I just want to go on a quick walk and talk, and I really want to understand your strategic vision so that I can align my training energy with your plan. I guarantee you can get in a senior leader's ear and say, hey, I want to make sure what I'm doing lines up with what you want. And we'll just take a quick 15-minute walk around the building. It's a beautiful day outside. If that's all you get, you can start to get a snapshot of what they're working on. Here's another approach for that distant executive who doesn't really see or know or understand training. It's not that they don't believe in training. It's just number 39 on their list of things to do. Probably number 139 on their list of things to do. Start providing them short, high-level executive summaries of your training programs with a breakdown of what the program is, quick bullet points of why that program is, and how that program ties to the strategic vision of the organization. You got to think strategic, not tactical. Well, I'm going to do 2 virtual sessions and it's going to be asynchronous. And then we're going to have an e-learning module with this really cool transition because that gets more learners learning. And I'm going to hit on all the different adult learnings. Scrap all that. I'm doing this one-day workshop on effective communication because you've outlined that communication is an opportunity for growth in the organization. So I've put together a training program for managers on how to be an effective communicator. Just that simple. And start just briefing them on that. Write out a memo, send it to them. Any questions, anything you want to know about, let me know. I'll be happy to discuss it. Send. Get on a Teams chat with them. Same thing. Brief them. Short, quick, high-level summaries. This is the program. This is why I'm doing it. And this is how it ties to you. This is how it ties to what you're trying to do. I guarantee you start doing that. And eventually they're going to go, hey, what is this? What is that Adam guy up to down there? And next thing you know, they come looking for you. So schedule time on their calendar, ask for a 15-minute walk and talk, start briefing them on your program. Lastly, to try to get the attention of distance, track relevant metrics and start reporting out on that. Track those relevant metrics and start reporting out on that. So, again, using the example of communication, the senior leadership recognizes a gap in communication in the organization. You take it upon yourself to put together a quick 1-day workshop on effective communication. You roll that out, you brief the senior leader that it's happening, you go do it, and then start tracking metrics. The participants, I've had this many people participate. These are the participants. Start giving some feedback. We've noticed a 3% improvement in issues created by a lack of communication. Or I've had feedback surveys from the participants that they have, 5-star program that this helped them to communicate better. Whatever. We could, that's the subject of a different live, but start tracking those metrics that are tied to the strategic vision of the organization, and then come up with the metrics that are relevant and start reporting that out to senior leadership. Then, again, you will probably start to find that they will come looking for you as opposed to you having to hound them for their attention. So there you go, my friends, NBT Nation. Good idea fairies, know-it-alls, dismissers, never knows what's going on in the distance. That's the management and leadership group. Super common sources of frustration, super practical things you can do to start bringing them on board. What do you think, NBT Nation? Jeremiah, if you're still out there, I've got a whole list of what to do with participants too. Think we should keep going, or should we make that part 2 of this live? What do you think, Jeremiah? Oh, this coffee is so good. NBT, if you're finding this useful, give it a thumbs up. Be sure to visit me at noboringtraining.com. Tons of products and services specifically dedicated to trainers. You've got free courses, free videos, paid subscriptions, paid video channels, infographics that you can buy and download, all sorts of stuff, free and paid, blog posts. Check it out, noboringtraining.com. All righty. I think I'm feeling pretty good. I've got, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 participants types that can be the common sources of frustration for trainers. We talked about managers and senior leaders, what specifically to do. Now let's talk about participants. All right. Number 1, the off-topic guy. You're trying to deliver some training, and these folks are 1000%. Everything they bring up is totally unrelated. Well, what about this thing over here? And what about that thing over there? And what about that thing that's 17 steps ahead? Super commonly frustrating because you're focused on your curriculum and they are desperately trying to pull you off track. And I guarantee you, I've seen this happen before where the other participants will start to get irritated. Here's exactly what you do. Have strong ground rules. From the start of the session, lay down the law in a respectful, empathetic, friendly sort of way. Here are the ground rules. We are going to follow this training plan. Of course, I want you to ask questions. I want you to raise your hand. I want you to ask for clarification, but let's focus. I've got a clear plan here. So focus on what we're talking about in the moment, and then let me decide when you ask those questions, do I address them in the moment or not? So have some clear ground rules and then keep reminding of participants throughout the session. 2, have an effective parking lot at the beginning of the session. Have a dry erase board, have a flip chart, have an electronic board if you're doing a virtual session, and explain to the participants, hey, when you ask your questions, if I don't know the answer in the moment, it's off topic or it's something better dealt with offline, excuse me, we're going to add that to the parking lot. We're going to throw it over there and I will deal with it later on. So ground rules and effective parking lot. And then number 3, don't be shy about addressing things after class. I think sometimes as trainers, we feel like we have to address everything in the moment and respond to everything that comes up with a solution in the moment. We're not vending machines. We are there to execute our training plan to benefit the learners so they can be more successful. It's all about the learners achieving their goals. And yes, we want them to ask questions. Yes, we want to respond in the moment. But at the same time, we have a duty to all of the participants, not just the one person who wants to go off track. We have a duty to all the participants to keep going towards that, keep executing on that plan to reach the session objective. So don't be shy to say, hey, that's a great question. I'm really glad you asked it. We're going to throw it in the parking lot. I'll see you after class. Stay after the session. I'll be glad to answer that question. Stay after the session. I'll be glad to show you this video that deals exactly with what you're talking about. Hey, after the session, I'm going to send you a link to other resources, but it's really not relevant to what we're talking about right now. I guarantee you start doing that a couple times, that is going to get the off-topic person right back on track. So set ground rules, parking lot, address after class. You are in charge of that plan, the training plan, not the participants. I know that sounds a little bit harsh, but I'm telling you, if you suddenly start responding to every last question, everybody else is going to start asking questions too. And what about this? And what about that? And you'll lose track of the class. Trust me. All right. Common sources of frustrations for trainers and what to do about it. We talked about managers and the leaders in the first half. The second half, we're talking about participants. All right. The challenger. You're delivering some training. You're delivering the session virtually in person, and you got the challenger guy in the class or gal. You got the challenger, and they want to push back, and they want to trick you up, and they want, well, what about this and what about that? And I don't know that I agree with that. And this one time I had a situation that was totally different, and they start kind of pushing back on you. It can be tough. It can be really tough, and I've seen it. You might have the experienced person on the group who's been with the company for 20 years, and they don't think they need any training, and they take it as a personal affront that they have to come to your training session, and they kind of do this. I don't need no stinking training, and they're going to push back on you. You might have somebody that's just their personality. They want to challenge your assertions. There's a lot of reasons why they are going to push back on you. Here's how you handle that. Number one, don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. That legacy worker who's been there 20 years and they're just kind of butthurt that they have to come to your training session. That's not about you. That's them. So don't take it personally. That person who just doesn't like to, kind of be they don't like they don't like that you know something and they feel out of control. That's a them issue, not a you issue. So I don't want to be like armchair psychologist, but don't take it personally. You have to keep your cool, keep your calm. The second you start burring up and you start to get into a little bit of back and forth, oh, I'm telling you, they are going to use that as they will know they got to you. They will know they got under your skin, and then they're going to start doing it more and more and more. So don't take it personal. Let them ask their questions. Let them ask their questions. Now, I just got done talking about the off-topic people about, you're in control and you have to stay focused on your plan. So this seems like I'm talking, out of both sides of my mouth. But those challengers, let them ask their questions. Sometimes those challengers will really reveal weaknesses in the organization. Sometimes those challengers will reveal where the process you're teaching is broken. They will reveal where there's a systems issue that needs to be resolved. Sometimes they will reveal that the organization needs to respond in the moment with more resources, or there's a management problem. So let them ask those questions. That, even though it pushes your ego a little bit, it can be great information that then ostensibly you're there to train, but you can take that information and then report that upstream, and you might find out that you have a real systems problem in your organization. You have a process problem. You have a resource problem, not a training problem, but you have these bigger picture issues going on because you let that individual ask their question. The other thing that letting people ask their questions does is that sometimes people just want to be heard. Sometimes people just want to be they feel um, marginalized. They feel like I've been here 20 years and nobody ever listens to me. And you can be a vehicle for them to have their concerns heard. Now, again, you got to kind of manage things because you're not there to let them voice every last little concern. And sometimes those challenger people, you give them an inch and they take a mile. You got to be careful of that. But sometimes they need that inch to feel validated, to feel like there's a level of support. So let them ask those questions. Um, don't respond back with telling people why. Well, we're not going to do that because of this. Sometimes those challenger people start challenging you. And if you challenge them back, then they want to challenge you even more. So respond back instead with a Socratic question that helps them to figure it out on their own. Make them think out loud and reveal why they are thinking what they're thinking. Give them, hey, I hear what you're saying of like, I'm trying to teach you this. You don't think it'll work. You've given me a scenario. That's great. Let's play that out to its logical end. So let's say we do it your way. Well, what about this department over here that needs the information that I'm trying to train you about? They need that. What happens if we leave them out? And let them talk it out loud. And you just keep throwing in a very friendly, big smile, very well, okay. Now, if we do this, what impact does this have on this other third department? What impact does that have from a regulatory or compliance standpoint? What impact does that have on the operations of this fourth department over here? Just keep throwing out the, well, what if, what about, what happens, what make them think their way through, and then have them reveal that, we ought to do it this way. And then suddenly they figure out, and it's laid bare for all to see, that they haven't thought through the impact on the rest of the organization. They just want to do it their way because that's the way they want to do it. And now all of a sudden it's pretty obvious they haven't thought about these other 10 departments out there. And now they're like, you know what? I guess I kind of see what you're saying. And you didn't have to have this. They figured it out for themselves. So use those Socratic discussions, help them to figure out the issues for themselves. Lastly, with the challenger, be honest when they're right. I mentioned before, let them ask their questions because they may reveal an issue with your organization. And when they're right, acknowledge it. You know what? That's a damn good point. Never thought about that. You know what? I'm going to make a note of this. Let's get together after the session. Let's really explore this because, buddy, you are on to something here. So acknowledge when they're right. All right. Another common source of frustration. Well, at my old company, this is the way we used to do it. This is the way we've always done it. At my old company, this is really common if you're training new hires to the organization with whatever you're doing as part of like an onboarding or a job skills type training, and you're dealing with new members of the organization. Oh, at my old company. Two things to think about here. This is a pretty quick one. Are they just searching for clarity and understanding? Or are they stuck in the past? If they're just searching for clarity, they're trying to connect. Hey, this is how we did it at our company. Oh, cool. Great. Here's how we do it at this company. And they're just trying to connect the dots. That's cool. You want to foster that. Don't be thrown off by, oh, we did it this way at my place. They're not challenging you. They're just trying to figure out how it's supposed to be done now. So don't take it as a challenge. But sometimes they're stuck in the past. Sometimes they're just stuck with the way it's always been done. And that's the way, they're stuck in the past. And it is a challenge. And you have to really nicely start to say, hey, I know that's how the way you used to do it, but here's how we do it. Here's why we do it that way. And if you want to explore more, let's get together after the session and we can get into how you used to do it. But this is how we do it now. And this is what we're here to learn. So a couple different ways to handle at my old company, folks. All right. Two more people, the surface level people. You're delivering some training. It's instructor-led training in person, virtually, whatever. And you get that individual who never wants to move beyond the surface level. They always give you the easy textbook answer. Hey, why do you think we do it this way? And they give you the super obvious answer that somebody off the street could come in and tell you, but they give you that super duper surface level question. It can be so frustrating because you're trying to get that knowledge to go deeper, and they just give you the super obvious answer all the time. Super frustrating. All right. A couple things you could do there. Number one, consider personality styles. You may have somebody who's just a surface level thinker, and that's it. They're never going to go to that deep second level, third level, fourth level type of understanding. They're just going to take what you tell them at face value, and they're never going to give you the creative, like the deep answer. Also, think about extrovert versus introvert. If you have somebody that's maybe more towards the introverted scale and you're trying to get them to go deeper and deeper, they may not want to. And that's okay. That's fine. We have other ways to verify their understanding. We can measure that understanding through quizzes, tests, practical exercises, whatever. It doesn't have to be through discussion. So if they're more introverted, don't try to force them to go more deep because that may not be a comfortable place for them. All right. So consider personality styles. I just started to touch on point number 2, mix up your response methods. So don't always just do instructor-led delivery. Let people give their responses in a written format. Ask them a question and then have them give you written answers back. You can do the verbal. Have them record a short video. Have them perform a practical exercise. Have them do a group breakout discussion where they can talk in small groups. But don't always stand in front of the class, ask questions, and expect answers, because those people who have a hard time moving past the shallow answers may not like that format. So give them other ways to give you responses to hopefully get them to go deeper. All right. In some cases, with people who just want to stay shallow, you have to give them more complicated scenarios to deal with. In other words, lead them to the deeper answers, lead them out of the shallow waters in a gentle way by giving them more complicated scenarios. Here's a quick practical example. If you're teaching people how to do, you're teaching people safety. Hey, why do you think we're talking about iPro right now? Well, because we don't want people to get hurt. Yeah, okay, that's the surface level answer. What do you think the impact is to the organization if we start having eye injuries? Oh, well, it's really expensive. Yeah, that's true. What do you think that cost is per worker every year? What do you think the cost is, or what do you think the productivity impact is if we have more eye injuries? What do you think that does to the number of orders we ship every year if one person on the team suddenly is out for one day? Just keep guiding them to go deeper and deeper by giving them the more complicated scenarios. So if you want to push somebody past the surface level, ask more complicated questions or give them more complicated scenarios to deal with. That's the way you get somebody past the surface level issue. Awesome. Jeremiah. Yep, that's solid. Thank you so much for that feedback, bro. I really appreciate that. That's how you deal with a surface level person. And then one last person to wrap up today's live. We've been talking about common sources of training frustration. We talked about management and leadership in the first half of the live. If you're catching this if you just joined us, go back and watch the replay. Now we're talking about the participants in the second half. In part 2, which will be coming out in a week or so, we're going to talk about other sources of frustration, logistics issue. What do you do when people steal your room? What do you do when technology doesn't work? What do you do when your computer melts down? What do you do when there's flight disruptions for your in-person workshop? That's in a future live. We'll talk about those. Right now, we're talking about participants. So we got one last one to get through. If you're finding this helpful, give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment, share the link with friends, and be sure to visit me at noboringtraining.com and subscribe to the channel here so I can keep making great content. All right. Last person that can be a source of frustration. It's the superstar. You're delivering training. You're delivering an in-person or virtual session, and you got that superstar. And let's say it's a couple-day program. Day 1, they are a complete rock star and they start dominating everything. They start just sort of taking over. And usually one or two things happen. Either everybody else shuts down because that one individual takes over, which is not good, or in day 2 of your workshop, the superstar shuts down because they're bored and now they zone out because you left them in the dust. So either they take over everything and nobody else participates, or they get bored as the session or program goes on. Here's what you do. Don't let them get bored. Don't let them get bored. If they're superstars and they clearly are accelerated, they clearly are gobbling up the information, feed them advanced level material after the session. Guide them to more resources during the session. Give them more complicated scenarios during the session. Invite them in as I don't want to say an assistant instructor, but guide them in. Or bring them into the process. Let's say you're going to do a group breakout. Instead of giving the assignment to everybody, including the rock star, ask the rock star to be the guy or the moderator of the group discussion. Give the rock star an assignment. Give them something to do. So you can either accelerate the information you're giving them in the moment. You can give them more complicated stuff in the moment. You can give them accelerated, more complicated information after the class, or you could bring them in to being a problem solver for you. Here's a quick practical example. When I did a lot of sales training, I used role plays a lot, all the time. And as I identified people who clearly understood what was going on, they were clearly crushing it, they were the superstar, I invited them in to be the role player. So instead of me being the customer, teaching the new salespeople, doing role plays with the salespeople, instead of me being the customer, I had the superstar start being the customer, the trainee be the salesperson, and then I observed. All right, now I killed 2 birds with 1 stone. One is they got a break from listening to me. 2, the superstar got to be the customer, and they had to start to apply the information that they've learned as if they were a customer. So they're continuing to learn and they're staying engaged. And now that salesperson who is conducting the role play, they get a different person to play off of so that they have to apply the information. Oh, win-win-win all the way around. So bring the superstar in to the training. You got to kind of get creative. You got to think your way through that. You got to be prepared for that. But that is a great way to use the superstar so they don't get bored. Awesome. What if that superstar gets arrogant? I've seen that happen. You get the real rock star, but they are just so arrogant. And they either want to sort of take over, they want to dominate, they want to kind of really take the scenario, or they want to take the session in a different direction that you don't necessarily want to go. Use that Socratic method. Provide them some specific scenarios. I've also done this, and I've seen this, where after, let's say it's a multi-day session, and day 1, the superstar is trying to pull you off track. After the session ends, pull the superstar aside and say, hey, for tomorrow's session, here's the scenario I'd like you to prepare. I want you to prepare how you would handle blah, blah, blah thing. I want you to prepare a group exercise for everybody to learn the information from session number 1. I want you to be ready to talk about blah, blah, blah. I'm going to send you information after class, and I want you to be ready to present it in day 2. But give them some scenarios so that you're sort of guiding them in a direction. In those scenarios, you can put some Easter eggs that start to reveal to that kind of know-it-all superstar. It will reveal to them why what they're wanting to do is off topic. It isn't helpful in the moment. It's advanced level knowledge. It's something that you don't really need to know right now. You kind of sprinkle that into your Easter eggs. So, in other words, you're combining give the superstar an assignment for day two so they don't get bored, and give them a scenario that helps them figure out for themselves that ain't it. We're not learning that. We're learning what Adam wants to learn, not what the superstar wants to learn. Hopefully that made sense, but that's a really great way to bring them into the process and kind of get them going. All right, what do you do if they're arrogant and they start to kind of border into that know-it-all type category? Um, Yep, I'm going to my reserve coffee. We've been going so long, I'm into my reserve coffee mug. How about that? All right. This is emergency break in case of. I wouldn't pull this out right as like my first step. This is something I keep it in my back pocket. Sometimes those superstars, especially if they're super arrogant and they just sort of get that know-it-all type quality about them, and they really, we're kind of going back to the challenger type mindset that I talked about a few minutes ago. Sometimes those real rock stars, sometimes they got to kind of be taken down a peg. Sometimes you got to throw something at them that really shows them that they really don't know as much as they think they do. Here's a scenario that I've experienced a done. You have a new salesperson who's coming as part of like a sales training program, right? They're new to the company, but they just think they are the bee's knees, that they are the world's greatest salesperson. They think they are Zig Ziglar reincarnated, that they are the greatest salesperson ever, and they don't need any sales training. Why am I getting sales training? I've been selling for 25, 30 years. I don't need this. And they're just such a superstar that they start to zone out. Hit them with a role play. Okay, if they're a superstar, hit them with a role play earlier. Jeremiah, how did you know that's me? Jeremiah, I have to break you. It's like Ivan Drago and Rocky. We must break you. um, I'm not saying to do this in a rude way. I'm not saying to do this in a disrespectful way. You have to be respectful. You have to model the ethos of your organization. But you also have to put that superstar, especially if they kind of think they're too cool for school. You kind of got to make them see that they should pay attention by, I don't want to say setting them up to fail. That's not what I'm trying to say, but put them in a position where they got to put up or shut up. And you've been in that organization for a hot minute. Put them through their paces. If it's a sales situation, you are the hard customer who doesn't want to buy, and you throw every objection at them that you can think of, and you throw back at them price objections, and you don't believe when they say, oh, this product's really great. You say, well, I don't think so, and here's why. And you really come at them again, not disrespectfully, not to belittle them. That's not at all what I'm saying. But if you're trying to win them over, show them why they should be paying attention to your training. Let's say it's a safety related thing. You're trying to do some safety out on the floor, and you get that person, I've been doing this job since you were in diapers. I don't need to pay attention. And, maybe they are really good at what they're doing. Okay, cool. Let's have you demonstrate the process. Now, if they come out and they demonstrate the safety process and they crush it, reward them, show them, praise them. See, everybody, this is what it's like. This is what I'm talking about. You need to do it like this individual right here. Praise them, reward them, really acknowledge that they do, in fact, they are a superstar. And then say something like, but we still need to complete this training, everybody, because this is a regulatory requirement on the organization. Now you've brought the superstar in. They were thinking they were too cool for school. You've used them as the role model for everybody else. You've set them up as sort of a subject matter expert, but you've also communicated to them, we're still doing this training. I still need you to pay attention, and we're still going to move forwards. I've seen that be very effective. I've also seen it where you're doing the safety, you have that individual demonstrate the safety procedure, and guess what? They don't know it. They don't know how to do it, and they fall down. And, it's a little, again, be got to be very careful about this. This could be its own separate live. But if you do it the right way, in a friendly sort of way, a supportive way, but you have that superstar who thinks they're too cool for school and they don't really need this training, and they're a little bit on the arrogant side, and then they fail miserably, it can prick their ego enough so that then they say, you know what? Maybe I didn't know it as well as I thought I did. Maybe I should pay attention. You're not doing it to bust their chops. You're doing it to get them to see the value of the session that's there. Now, that calls on us as trainers to be prepared. We better know our stuff. You darn well better know that safety procedure inside and out. You better be able to demonstrate as a trainer that you can do that procedure and do it great. I mean, listen, we're on dangerous ground here. If you're doing that sales scenario and you're going to do the role play, you better be prepared to do the role play yourself as the salesperson and demonstrate that you know the stuff and that you can overcome the objection. You better be ready for it. But by putting that somewhat arrogant participant, that arrogant superstar participant put them through their paces, they're either going to excel, which then you can leverage as a learning opportunity and bring them in as a sort of pseudo partner, or you can help them to figure out for themselves, I better pay attention. But you got to be ready to demonstrate that you got the skills to pay the bills too. So there you go, the superstars. All right, participants. We talked about how to handle off topic. We've talked about how to handle the challenger. We had talked about how to handle at my own company. We've talked about the service level person, and we've talked about the superstar. Lots of practical advice in there. In the first half, we talked about managers and leaders. We talked about the good idea fairy, the know-it-all, the dismisser, the never knows what's going on manager or leader, and then the distant, especially senior leaders, the distant avoidant person, with all sorts of practical tips there. Lots of good advice. Jeremiah, you're on the line here, or anybody who happens to be out there listening in. What has been the scenario or the advice that I've given that resonates with you the most? Drop me a comment. Let me know. Leave me something in the comments there. And we'll do that too as we start to wrap up here. What scenario or piece of advice was resonated with you the most throughout this hour-long live? Leave me a comment down below. Logistics, that's going to be the next subject in a future live, not this one. We're done for today. But in a future live, we'll revisit this with part 2 of common training frustrations, and we'll dive into logistics. When people steal your room, when your computer blows up, when travel plans happen, everybody gets the flu, whatever. There's lots of logistical stuff that can cause us heartburn. I'll tackle that later. Any specific piece of advice, Jeremiah, that really oh God, when coffee runs out, 5-alarm disaster. What do you do when the coffee runs out? We're hosed. We'll talk about that in part 2 of the event. Part 2 of that MBT live. Probably be about a week or 2 before we get to that. Maybe next weekend we'll tackle that. Part 2 of training frustrations, including logistics. All right. There you go, my friends. Managers and leaders can be the source of a lot of frustration and heartburn. We've talked about how to deal with them. The participants themselves can be the source of a lot of frustration and heartburn. We've talked about how to deal with them. And then we'll deal with live in the future. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you have, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Give it a thumbs up if you're watching this on the replay. Subscribe to the channel so that we can keep making great content like this. Be sure to visit me over at noboringtraining.com, where we have all sorts of products and services. Free course on the 6 pillars of effective training, free blog posts, free videos, links to video channels. Also, we have services. So you have NBT Nation, you have uh, Training Basics channel, where if you're new to training, you subscribe to the channel, get all sorts of video training tools. You have the session planning tool, you have the infographics pack, all sorts of stuff. Be sure to join me there. Jeremiah, thanks for joining me, my friend. Really appreciate you hopping in. Appreciate all the comments. Super awesome. You, sir, are a rock star. You are Project Revolution. If you need project management support, visit Jeremiah Hammond. He's got a channel here on YouTube, Project Revolution. Join him at Jeremiah Hammond. Search him out. He can find him. You can find him here. He's also very active on LinkedIn and Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Not so much on TikTok. I'm trying to get him into the TikTok world. And we definitely, absolutely need to do a live together. It's been an hour and 5 minutes. I need more coffee. I need some breakfast. That's all we have for today's live. Remember, noboringtraining.com. It doesn't need to be cumbersome, complicated, or costly to transform the training in your organization. It doesn't need to be that way. The No Boring Training method can help you as a leader get the results you want on those top line metrics. Drive revenue, drive profit, maintain your talent, retain your talent, drive net promoter score through effective training strategies. If you're a trainer yourself, you can use the No Boring Training method so you can get results, not yawns, from your training sessions. That's all I got. NBT, SPAC'd out. Thanks everyone for joining me. Talk soon.